Hey guys, what's going on? It is Filmington. This is going to be a mail bin video. Got some mid-end items, some high-end items, stuff that I picked up throughout the month of January as well as late December. This off-season has been very eventful. Usually, I'm at least accustomed to seeing a drop-off in prices shortly after the playoffs, maybe even before the playoffs even start with modern baseball card values. I usually see a good buying opportunity where values are low in the November, December, and even January timeframe. But this year it's been a little bit different. A lot of the younger players, a lot of even the undervalued guys, or the guys I thought that would be undervalued, their values trickled up in as early as mid-November or late November, throughout the course of December in many cases, as well as in January. Baseball America just published the top 100 prospect list, and that certainly didn't help matters for a lot of these players if you are a buyer. So in particular, Gleyber Torres, I don't have hard numbers to back that up, but his Bowman Chrome first autograph from 2015, those really started to soar in mid-November, late November, as well as December. Fernando Tatis is another one that followed a similar pattern. Now, Gavin Lux, probably it wasn't a complete coincidence that I also featured him as one of my top picks in a speculation series episode that I posted on December 31st. But his PSA 10 Bowman Chrome first autographs from the Bowman Draft product of 2016, they were 263 on average in November, 255 on average in December, and then they are up in this month 49.6% to $382 for an average price. And we're not talking about limited data points here. There were 6 to 7 sales that I found for each of those 3 months. So that is just an example of the market probably being a little bit hotter than usual. Just for whatever reason, it's changed to being less of a cyclical collecting game, investing game, whatever you want to call it. And it's turned into a year-round thing, which is ultimately healthy. Anything that stabilizes the market is a positive factor, I would say. Let's get started. I'll focus on some of the smaller pickups, some of the mid-end stuff. First one, this guy was featured in Speculation Series, episode number 1, Kyle Tucker. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the likes of Kyle Tucker and Yordan Alvarez, how affected they are from the Houston Astros scandal. Clearly based on the evidence, it was focused more on 2017, but there are anecdotal examples of instances where they could have cheated in 2018, 2019 as well, with the possible buzzers. But with a guy like Kyle Tucker, we're talking a very small subset of at-bats that he had in the major leagues. So if any advantage there was to him, that really wouldn't be significant anyways, I would say. So I think Kyle Tucker, and even going a little bit deeper beyond that, I think Yordan Alvarez are going to be safe. Now, investors or speculators might be a little bit cautious with making big acquisitions of either of those two players, and I don't blame them. But it really hasn't affected Yordan Alvarez's values. His Bowman Chrome base autographs are now around 500, and they were, I believe, 375 to 400 about a month ago. So this is Kyle Tucker's Topps Chrome autograph green. Picked it up from a Facebook group. I think I paid $40, got a good price on it. Is this submission worthy? I don't know. I think it's got a bad corner. I've got to look at it a little bit deeper, but it's a nice little Kyle Tucker right there, who hopefully will be the everyday outfielder for them this year. I know they still have Reddick, Brantley, and Yordan Alvarez, who's probably going to serve primarily as a DH. Again, we will see about that. And of course, George Springer. Next up, Luis Arraez. So I ended up selling the 1-of-1 Platinum Parallel that I purchased, and I picked up 2 of these vintage stock cards just because I figured, maybe I could get some of that exposure back that I lost from selling that Platinum Parallel. Not all of the exposure. I do have a Bowman Chrome first orange autograph that's out to PSA, so fingers crossed on that. Outside chance of a 10. These Arraez vintage stocks numbered to 99, I might send off to PSA. Now this is just a bonus card he included, which was pretty cool, one of the sellers. And it's kind of funny how both the sellers, I'm pretty sure they were different sellers, the packages came in 2 different envelopes. I paid $65 for each of them, but they both used Scotch tape on the top loaders. I guess that is kind of a common, although not best practice. One of these has a pretty tough corner, but I think it is the superior version if you look at the front. And yeah, we'll see. 9s or 10s on those. And I'm going to try to stick to a new rule where I have many different options when I go through PSA bulk submission groups, and there are some that range from 65 or even, I think it might even be 85 business days if I want to pay a little bit cheaper, to as quick as 25 business days for some of these cards. Still not express service, but the difference is really $2 or $3, and I think I'm going to start to opt for the quicker service. And 25 business days, as you guys know, doesn't really mean 25 business days. It's going to mean about 2.5 months. And I think I might opt to splurge, pay a little bit extra for the raw cards that are worth more than $50. I think I'd rather have them back, within the 2 to 2.5 month time frame versus the 4 to 5 month time frame if I am to pay the lowest amount for that 65 or 85 business day service. Next up is my purchase from a Facebook group. These hardly ever come up. As you can see, it's a BCCG 10. I made an episode few months ago questioning the validity of some of these independent grading card companies. Even though BCCG is affiliated with Beckett, it's really not affiliated with BGS. It's confusing, and it's got a lot of its own issues, which I talk about in that episode. But there just aren't a whole lot of copies of this that come up. PSA 9s, 10s, BGS 9s, 9.5s. You don't really see them. And I think this was actually cheaper than a raw copy, which I will always go for a oft-brand 10 over a raw copy if it's an online purchase and I can't see any discernible advantages of, that raw copy, basically. So it's got a corner that's showing a little bit of white. It's clearly not going to cross to anything. I'm not going to bother taking this out. I'm not going to bother to do anything with it, but that was my expectation. I think I paid $45 for this. This was actually... the seller was intending to put this in a RAS, but this is a bit of advice for you that don't do RASs like myself. If you see somebody throw up something for RAS, and if you really want the card and you don't do RASs, then don't be afraid to be the first person that comments. Of course, if it's half filled, it's not really feasible, but if you're the first person that sees it, write down a comment, and if you make them an offer that's 95%, 100%, or even maybe 90% of the total ask. Basically, if the res is going for, then there's a chance that they might pull it and sell it to you for that quick sale. Plus, they don't have to tip somebody to run the video. That's how razzes work, although I've never done them. I see the allure of doing razzes if you're the person selling the card. Even as a buyer, if it's a player that you really want, if it's hard to find, and if the price is right, then being a buyer, or I guess you'd call a participant in a Raz, I see how that makes economic sense. It's just the addiction, the emotional piece of it. If you win or don't win, and then you're trying to make your money back, or you get addicted to the feeling of winning and you keep on doing Razes. I don't want to, belabor you guys at that point, but those are just some of my thoughts. Next up, so here's a guy who I didn't feature in the speculation series, and I really saw 3 flags. If I'd only seen 2 flags, I probably would have probably mentioned him or fit him into one of the episodes. But the flags are underperformance in the majors this year, injuries, a history of injuries, which he's dealt with, I believe, 2 years in a row. And then the third one is the ability to find a position, basically the overcrowded Colorado infield situation, which they're dealing with today. They have Daniel Murphy. He doesn't really play second base anymore, but Ryan McMahon, Garrett Hampson in the minors, who's sort of waiting in the wings, even though he kind of failed with his first rendezvous in the majors. You have Nolan Arenado. He's at third base. And, of course, Trevor Story is not going anywhere at shortstop. You guys have probably heard a lot about the Arenado rumors. They're becoming more and more real. He's getting more and more frustrated with the continual talk of him getting moved before the season starts. He feels disrespected. I think that there's a greater than 50% chance that Nolan Arenado is not on the Rockies opening day roster, and that Brendan Rodgers has the chance to play. And maybe last year, some of his performance issues were related to the shoulder impingement that he dealt with in, I think, May. Although that's not really clear from what I've looked into, but not a bad guy to take a flyer on. I actually bought this from somebody who told me he liked my speculation series episodes, and I think I got a decent deal on it. I think $70 for the refractor. I also have a PSA 10 that I bought at an even better time. I got that for $100. Next up, started to pick up and mention more and more of these Topps Chrome Sapphires, namely the ones from 2016 to 2018, the ones that are numbered, the base cards that are, they only printed between 250 to 285 of. Ronald Acuna, it's hard to find a PSA 10 of those. I know Silver Jackified Joe, he picked up a PSA 10. I mean, at this point, you're gonna have to pay close to $4,000 for a PSA 10 of Acuna. And Gleyber Torres is quickly following suit, not selling for nearly as much, but there was a recent comp of Gleyber Torres that was around 700 a few weeks ago that went via auction. And I don't think there are going to be any more of Gleyber Torres, any more comps of Torres that are under 1,000. That is my hunch. And that is because people are taking notice of Topps Chrome Sapphire. People are also taking notice of those two players, Acuna and Torres, and that getting that image that is on the Series 2 short print, bat down for Acuna, the horizontal for Torres, it's just difficult to find, and there is a premium on those players. Like I talked about in a previous episode, how Acuna was selling for 50 times Albies, and there's a reason for that, and it's not just because of popularity and performance. It's also because of just the Sapphire card being even more desirable for those two players than it would be for the Flahertys, the Rafael Devers of the world. But pick this up for I think like $70. Certainly not cheap compared to comps, but I just think that Topps Chrome Sapphire base cards will continue to go up. Maybe not 2019 as much, just because they printed about 1,000 of those, and the autographs from 2019 are definitely holding their own and overperforming the non-autographed equivalents of those players. All right, so next up is going to be, this was sort of a FOMO purchase. Try not to do a whole lot of that, but as soon as it was announced that Gerrit Cole was going to the Yankees, and that he had received the biggest contract for a pitcher of all time, over $300 million. I thought it was a decent opportunity to buy Gerrit Cole. The guy had it listed at 300, buy it now or best offer. And I mean, this is a pitcher, and I did show Jack Flaherty as well. So I just want to be clear. My overall allocation of pitchers is 2% or less. I think it would be risky to break the 5% mark. Unless, of course, you were to go with players like Clayton Kershaw, Max Scherzer, where most people consider them to be locks, to be Hall of Famers. Then I could definitely see exceptions. I mean, and we're talking modern players, of course, not Nolan Ryans. But I just think that he's a really intense player, Gerrit Cole is. He's somewhat of a warrior on the mound. So having that camo background, number to 99, classic Topps Update rookie card. I just thought that was pretty cool, and I figured, you know what, at the worst, I might lose like $25-50 on this, but it's just a really cool card to have. It's going to look sweet in my display case. It's nicely centered for a 10. Corners look great. Next up, we talked about Gavin Lux at the beginning of the episode, and after making that Speculation Series episode, it was December 31st, I knew that the window was narrowing for my chance to be able to get my hands on one of them. So I don't like or advertise generally to pick up green refractors. Certainly green shimmers or waves, stuff like that. If those even exist, I would completely steer away from those. But this is a guy that it was just too difficult to get my hands on a base. I didn't know that they'd be going up 50%, but I definitely saw the momentum coming into play, and I thought that this might be my only chance to get my hands on a Gavin Lux autograph. It's nicely centered. It's not a crossover candidate to Beckett, just because there are some issues with the card. I believe the surface as well as the corners. The corners on the back, bottom left, bottom right. There's a decent amount of white there. And the autograph, it's a little streaky, so with Beckett, you always, or you should, if you have a Bowman Chrome autograph, try to get the autograph graded, or it's going to be frowned down upon, even if it does have a perfect auto. Just one of those things where with the PSA, if it doesn't have an autograph grade, then it's cool. It's actually expected to not have an autograph grade, even if it is a first Bowman Chrome card. So if you do get a green autograph, or just a green refractor, Bowman Chrome first, even purple. Try to get really good subgrades because you're already sort of compromising on the color. You're not going with the standard rainbow colors of blue, orange, gold, red, and the regular refractor that's usually numbered either 499 or 500. But going with the green, try to be a little bit more picky. The sellers are usually willing to work with you a little bit better. I have this offseason, I've taken a risk on a lot of different greens just because I'm very bullish about the players. I've just had a really good track record of being able to turn profits with greens. I just think in certain cases you can get a hell of a deal, especially when the liquidity or the supplies dried up with the base Bowmans, with the blues, and they're just really unattainable. That's when I start to go after the greens. So I like to apply a multiplier of ×3 versus the base with green refractors. Now, some dealers, some collectors, investors, etc., prospectors are not always going to agree with me when I say that. They might be closer to ×2, but I've found that I'm able to get a ×3 multiplier applied to players as long as they're desirable. We're not talking about pitchers that have already peaked, the Rick Porcellos of the world. We're talking about some of the top players, young players in the game, established players in the game. I think green can be a decent buying opportunity, but it's always going to be for the right price. And again, if you do go with green, don't get a PSA 9 like me. That was extra risky. Try to go for a BGS 9.5 with really good subgrades. That means at least 4 9.5s or a PSA 10. So here's a guy that was listed number 1 on the first 2 prospect lists that I saw that came out over the last 2 or 3 months. I think one was either Yahoo or CBS, one was MLB.com, and the one that's the most reputable that came out, that always comes out in late January, is Baseball America's Top 100. And Wander Franco, as expected, was ranked number 1 on the list. And Wander Franco's cards, even prior to that, I've really been following his base Bowman Chrome. These have become really, really difficult to find, probably starting mid-December. People are holding these cards, whether they plan to sell them before he gets called up, after he gets called up, after he gets promoted to the next level. I don't know. All I know is a buying opportunity for Wander Franco is closing, and that people smell the next Vlad, not necessarily the next Vlad in regards to what he does at the major league level, but sort of that minor league hype. Luis Robert is going to make his major league debut on opening day. Joe Adell has a chance to break the team. But after that, where's the next really explosive player going to come from? It's going to come from Wander Franco, and a lot of people think that he could get called up as soon as late 2020. And at this point, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think that there are some factors that are helping his chances of getting called up. That is Tampa Bay probably being a wild card contender again, having a more healthy team. The Red Sox strength of their team actually going the opposite direction. Also, you have a team that has taken chances on younger players in the past, like Evan Longoria. But then you have a team that doesn't have a fan base. So the cost of them not promoting him to try to keep people in the stands isn't as great as it would be with other teams. So they could kind of maybe hold him out a little bit longer, kind of what the Blue Jays did with Vlad, what the White Sox did with Eloy Jimenez, where a lot of people thought that they were ready, major league ready at the end of 2018. So we'll see with Wander Franco. My plan isn't to hold him until he gets called up anyways. I just think there's too much risk in doing that. And that might work for a guy like Zion. He starts playing and his card's a double. But in baseball, it's just too risky for me to do that, especially after seeing guys like Keston Hiura, Yordan Alvarez. When they got called up, there wasn't really a significant increase in their values, even though they both crushed it to different extents. You might wonder why I picked up this card. 9 autographs, guys, by the way. If you're newer to buying autograph stuff from Beckett, try not to buy a 9 autograph. They're really hard to sell. Generally, you're looking at between a 30 to 40% drop in value versus the 10 autograph. There was an article that I was reading years ago on Blowout. What would you rather own? And I was actually stunned by the results. But what would you rather own? A BGS 9.5 with an auto of a 9 or a BGS 9 with an auto of a 10? And almost everybody preferred the BGS 9 with an auto of a 10. And to me, I was like, but why? And the logic was actually that the autograph is the most important part of the card since it's autographed. And because about 95% of modern cards from the last 5 years that get submitted to Beckett get that 10 autograph. The 9 just looks bad because you have a less than perfect grade on the condition of the card and a less than perfect grade on the autograph as well. Whereas with a BGS 9 auto 10, at least, you know, the most important part of the card, because it's autographed, is coming back as being a perfect grade of a 10. So this card, why did I buy it? Because it was cheaper than raw versions of this card, and because PSA is much more lenient on centering versus Beckett. It comes up, if you read about it, with their PSA grading scale. To get a PSA 9, you can have as bad as 65-35 centering on the front. Usually 60-40 is what they want to see, but this got an 8 centering by Beckett standards, but I think that the centering is going to be good enough to get that 65-35. Look at the other subgrades, guys. Edges 9.5, corners 9.5, surface 10. Now, Beckett's not always perfect, and you always have to, your most valuable tool is yourself and analyzing whether this is a cross candidate or not. But I've looked at the card and it looks pretty sharp, guys. And the back centering, which PSA cares even less about, is also within the standards of a 9, I believe. Again, getting that 9 autograph out of here, sending it to PSA, it clearly has a crappy autograph, but some people are able to look past that if it's in a PSA holder where the autographs aren't graded. It's one of those weird things. Again, if this was in a Beckett holder and there was no autograph grade, then you'd be more inclined to kind of scrutinize the autograph. Well, why wasn't the autograph graded? It's a Beckett slabbed card. So I am going to crack this fellow out, I think. Speaking of Wander Franco, so as I mentioned, the base Bowman Chrome autographs have really been difficult to find. And that is when I looked at some of the other Bowman Chrome cards that he has. Bowman Chrome Mojo cards, some of which are autographed with a different pose. And I wasn't really a huge fan of getting those cards. They seem a little bit more difficult to sell. And again, talking about value retention, they don't do as well as the first Bowman Chrome autographs. So that led me to the non-autograph refractors of the 2019 Bowman set. Getting that classic pose of Wander Franco, the same one in his first Bowman Chrome autograph, but going for some of those low-numbered parallels, the standard color refractors that could carry quite some secondary market demand. And that is when I stumbled upon this fella. Such a beautiful card. Look at that. Look even better if I took this sleeve off, right? Look at those subgrades. Centering 10, edges 10, corners 9.5, surface 9.5. It's pretty hard to put a value or to apply multipliers on cards like this. Most would tell you it's a lot more straightforward, and there's a lot more research out there on Blowout, etc., on how you would apply multipliers for the Bowman Chrome autographs. Looking at some other cards and examples, and based on, my previous research when I've bought and sold these cards, that this is worth roughly probably close to 6%, maybe between 6 to 7% of the equivalent Wander Franco Bowman Chrome Auto Orange. So I had to do my multipliers and figure out what I thought the orange was worth based on how much the base Bowman Chrome Auto has been selling for, which have been inflated as of late. So even knocking that down a little bit, I thought I got a good price on this. I was listed at $750, buy now or best offer. I could tell there were a lot of people watching it, or a lot of people that seen it or viewed it over the last hour, and I gave him full asking. There were a few other cards. I think there were some PSA 10 golds for a little bit more, but I prefer this True Gem Plus. Now, I don't know if it'll cross, but that's quite okay with me. It has this surface thing here. Again, though, that's quite okay with me. Looks beautiful in this holder. There's not that much condensation in this holder. And guys, look at those subgrades. I mean, 10 centering, 10 edges. Doesn't really get much better than that. If it did, this would come back BGS pristine. But yeah, just a sweet card. And one that undoubtedly will also go up in value, just like everything else. Maybe not to the same pace, but maybe not as fast as this guy. So the last one of Franco I picked up, I talked about greens, how usually you want to be selective over which greens you purchase. Don't get a shimmer, don't get a wave. And if you do go with a green, try to get one of a desirable player, one that you're very bullish about, one that could be a top 10, 15, 20 player in the game. One with really nice subgrades. So if it is a Beckett versus a PSA 10. Autograph is really clean on this one. Made this deal with somebody who actually watches my videos. Again, his name is Raf. I'm not sure if he has a YouTube channel. I think he does watch a lot. I plan to submit it to PSA because I think there might be a chance this could cross. I did talk with the seller. He said that to his knowledge, it had never been attempted to be crossed before. I think he has owned it since July, and I think it was originally slabbed closer to May. So there is a chance that it was sent to PSA. I'm going to also try to get the autograph graded with PSA. Normally I wouldn't, but the cost is the same. So it ends up being like between 100 to 110 to be able to cross this. But I think that there's about a 50% chance that this crosses. Again, your greatest asset is yourself. Evaluate the card like you're one of the independent grading companies yourself, like you're the PSA reviewer that's going to look at this, and would you give this a 10 if this was out of a slab? Clearly, it's not a perfect card, but I mean, the 10 edges is huge. Centering being 9.5 is good enough. Really comes down to the surface and the corners, and the corners look good enough for me. The surface with a Beckett slab is a little bit more cloudy than a PSA slab. I'm going to roll the dice here, and I'm going to say that there's about a 50% chance that this will get a 10. If it does get a 10, the value I think would go up at least $500. So for me, that's worth it to spend $110 there. Oh man, that math they taught us in high school, that's always comes in handy. And yeah, he threw in this card, nice guy. This is actually kind of a deep sleeper from the 2019 draft product. And a lot of people like this guy. A lot of people are collecting him. So really nice. Thank you, Raf, for doing that. We talked about Baseball America. We were just talking about 2019 Bowman draft. This is the second ranked player from the 2019 Bowman draft class. I believe, I could be missing some pitchers. But other than Adley Rutschman, who finished number 5, CJ Abrams beat out Andrew Vaughn, JJ Bleday, Hunter Bishop, Riley Green, and CJ Abrams is, I believe, 22nd on the list. Again, I went heavy with the greens. CJ Abrams, his values before the Baseball America list was published a week and a half ago or a week ago, whenever that was, they started to trend upwards almost to the point, probably equaling Andrew Vaughn. And that's when I saw my window closing with this guy. Of all the players from the 2019 draft class, the stats and the limited stints in the minor leagues were the most impressive across Abrams and Adley Rutschman. And this is a guy that has like a Mookie Betts type upside. Of course, the floor might be closer to somebody like D. Gordon, but he's got a great bat. Only guy that's in the top 100, I think, with 80 graded speed, which to the hobby might not be as valuable as power. But if he can be a 5-tool-like guy, the Padres, they have, of course, Tatis right now at shortstop. That could always change in the future. Abrams is a shortstop right now, but the Padres also have a longer-term deep need at center field, which he could probably be converted to. So pick this up from Instagram purchase, actually. There's a little bit of string in the slab, which is annoying. So I think I could send it to Beckett to get it regraded for free. But by the time I get it back, is it even worth it? I don't know. So I don't know what's more annoying, a string in the slab or like the slab being cracked. Like this almost looks like a crack. What would be worse? Because that would be a bad place for a crack. Picked up another one of his. This was, I think, like $72 eBay auction. 11 out of 50 gold refractor. So this might go off to PSA. We'll see. This is one that I'd try to get in that 25 business day submission. All right. So pretty long mail day. Hopefully you guys like what you saw. Hopefully I was able to provide some decent insight. Thank you for all watching, especially if you watched the entire video. Like, comment, subscribe. Filmington out.